In this last section, I want to talk about a 5-star partnership. Pastors often undervalue the unique connecting role of the local church. The Oikocentric Church designs ministry systems that facilitate the Great Commission through the lives of believers who, quite frankly, don't feel very great at very much. But convincing a congregation that we don't just go to church, but that we are the church, that's only the first step. After that, we have to learn how to act like the church, to come together as servant partners and accomplish our common objective. Believers co-mission or partner with Jesus. Pastors co-mission or partner with the church family. And a church family co-missions or partners with each other. Let's talk about how a membership becomes a partnership. Paul wrote this. He said, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they're something when they're not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load." That's Galatians chapter 6, verses 2 through 5. The carry our own load in verse 5 is different from verse 2, where Paul said to carry each other's burden. In verse 2, the Greek baros refers to that sinking feeling we get during those seasons of our lives when we're overwhelmed with circumstances and we need the help and encouragement of others. It's a simple idea. If we don't find support, we sink, we go down. But in verse 5, he says, we're always required to carry our own load. There, the Greek phortion means cargo, and it was often used in conjunction with an invoice as part of a freight shipment. The idea is similar in our context. There are two things in every mail order package. There's the cargo itself, what you ordered, and then there's the invoice, stuff you ordered, and the document describing the stuff you ordered. In essence, God has given us all an invoice, an assignment for our lives, like the oikonomia in Colossians 1. The question is this: does the cargo of our schedule, the focus of our lives, match that invoice? Are we pursuing the personal growth and personal mission that God expects of us? And if our cargo is not reflected by that invoice, wouldn't it be fair to expect God to feel much like you and I might feel when the invoice and the contents of a shipment we receive don't match? So does the cargo, your life, match your invoice, your mission? Does your personal growth facilitate your personal mission? When it does, other members of your church family will be encouraged by what you do. That's when roles at church become meaningful. For example, early one Sunday morning, a number of months ago, a man named Henry attended a worship service at our church with his wife. They'd been invited to church by one of his wife's coworkers. And it was during that service that Henry prayed to receive Christ into his life. Now, that's a great story, but that's not all that happened that day. Every great story has the untold yet equally great backstory. Let me tell you the backstory. Earlier that morning, a man named Dan led a team of 13 people who prepared the parking lot to make it easier for people like Henry and his wife to find a parking space. Then Greg and a different Dan arrived early, as did their 8 security volunteers, to prepare the campus to be a safe haven for Henry's family to enjoy. Cheryl and Dave, 2 of our greeters, welcomed Henry and his family before they had barely made it out of the parking lot. The friend who invited them then escorted Henry and his family to the children's complex, where a couple named Valerie and Doug helped them register their kids and acclimate Henry and his wife to what they could expect from the children's program, a program that was later presented by 16 other children's ministry team members. Making their way into the auditorium lobby, they were again warmly greeted by an usher named Lois, who helped them find a seat for the service. That day, the host pastor welcomed the audience, warmed up the crowd with a few announcements. Our worship leader led a band made up of 6 instrumentalists who were backed up by a vocal ensemble of 13 singers. I gave the message that morning, and later on, Henry would say that he felt as if I was speaking directly to him. Russ, Sam, and 9 other technicians and camera personnel saw to it that Henry not only could hear the message clearly, but could see the main points of the message in the Bible passages projected on the big screens. Henry indeed did give his heart to Jesus that day, and God used at least 78 different ministry partners to play a direct role in making it happen. Every one of those 78 people did something meaningful that day. In fact, every one of them did something eternal that day. Only 3 of the 78 were on the paid staff. Only one, their friend, had known Henry personally. That friend had been burdened with Henry and his wife's eternal destiny, but because 78 others carried their own load, her burden was carried as well. Similar sequences occur every weekend, dozens of times over. It's what I call a partnership. Joining a church just for the sake of being able to say you're a member, well, that's kind of silly, don't you think? Because membership without partnership is meaningless. Now, you have every right to ask potential members of your church to contribute their time and energy and resources to your Medicaid. But that means your job just got harder because now you have to do your part. And if you're unwilling to do your part, you're unfair to expect them to do theirs. That's why a membership agreement, an actual document, could reflect 2 things: what your expectations are for a church member and what their expectations can be for you. At HTC, we're looking for 5-star members who will commit to intentionally engage their oikos, regularly attend worship, regularly attend a small group, regularly serve in a ministry role, and regularly support the church financially. But every 5-star member has a right to be led by a 5-star pastor or a 5-star leadership team who will provide a good reason to go to church, do everything possible to provide meaning in every worship, small group, and service opportunity, and who will be accountable for how the resources of the congregation are leveraged to change the world. When first hearing about the evangelism component of the Oikos principle, many pastors quickly assume that the oikocentric church is just another way to describe a seeker church. But as you've seen throughout this entire series of presentations, that is not the case at all. On the other hand, the oikocentric church doesn't aspire to be a traditional church, the believer's church that many of us grew up in, and where the mission is placed on the back burner. In fact, the seeker movement emerged as a dissatisfaction with that traditional church. People wanted to make an impact in their communities. But the seeker movement, while encouraging the church to be outward focused, often struggled to help local churches efficiently manage their unique role as disciplers. The point of difference with an oikocentric church is that it is not looking for seekers or believers. We're looking for partners. Talking people into embracing the oikos principle is not that difficult. It makes so much sense and the data is clear. But while oikos may be a compelling idea, establishing a compelling partnership is critical. And I maintain that establishing that kind of partnership is due about 10% to what the congregation's willing to do and 90% to what you're willing to do as a leader to facilitate their mission to their oikos. If pastors fail to provide a compelling partnership, then church members become discouraged and slide back into their same old inward-focused mentality, cynical about the possibility of ever doing anything great for God. Sometime back, my 3-year-old granddaughter was reading Cinderella to her 1-year-old sister. Actually, she was only pretending to read because she didn't know how yet. But as she opened the book, I listened as she read the first page. Once upon a dream, we had a really big problem. Well, this series was probably not your first exposure to the oikos principle or its implications for world change, but it might be the first time you realized what we said from the very beginning of this journey. The next steps for your church are not up to your church family. They're up to you. And generating an oikocentric vision in a church that has for generations been structured for a congregation-centered ministry, now that's a dream with a lot of really big problems. These challenges have not provided an exhaustive list of ideas to help you solve those problems. Actually, it might be your innovation that helps us all refine our focus and better prepare Christ Church for her mission during the next decade. All that to say, let's keep the conversation going. After all, no meaningful conversation has ever taken place without at least 2 people's permission. Well, I'm in. Are you?